A wild gray wolf emerges from the shadows of the dense forest, its golden eyes locked onto the figure of a young man in a wheelchair. The air is crisp, the wilderness silent, except for the sound of the wolf's slow, deliberate steps on the frost-covered ground. The young man, stranded and alone, watches in both awe and fear. This isn't just an encounter, it's something more. He can feel it. His pulse races as the wolf inches closer, its breath visible in the cold air. What happens next will leave you speechless. Get ready for a story that will change everything you thought you knew about courage, survival, and the unbreakable bond between man and beast. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you. Logan Mitchell had always been drawn to the wilderness. It was the only place where he felt free, away from the stares and whispers that followed him in the city. Ever since the accident that took his ability to walk, the forest became his refuge, a place where he wasn't defined by his wheelchair, but by his love for nature. On this particular autumn afternoon, Logan had ventured deeper than usual, his all-terrain wheelchair crunching over the fallen leaves. He had planned carefully, he always did, but fate had other plans. A sudden downpour turned the dirt path into thick mud, and before he knew it, one of his wheels was stuck. He tried to maneuver out, but the chair wouldn't budge. Hours passed. The sun was sinking, taking the warmth with it. His phone had no signal. The weight of isolation pressed down on him as he realized the depth of his predicament. Then he heard it. A low, rhythmic crunching of footsteps against the earth. Slow. Calculated. His breath hitched as he turned his head and saw it. A wild gray wolf standing just beyond the trees, its piercing eyes locked onto him. Time seemed to freeze. Logan knew the dangers of encountering a wild predator. Wolves were rarely aggressive toward humans, but this was no ordinary situation. He was vulnerable, stranded in the middle of nowhere with no way to escape. The wolf took a step forward, then another. Logan's fingers gripped the arms of his chair, his heart hammering in his chest. The animal was close enough now that he could see the individual strands of its thick fur, the subtle rise and fall of its chest as it breathed. And then it stopped. Their eyes met, man and beast, both trapped in circumstances neither could fully understand. Logan's breath came in shallow bursts. The wolf's ears flicked back, its expression unreadable. For the first time since getting stuck, Logan felt something unexpected. He wasn't alone. The wolf remained still, watching Logan with cautious curiosity. The young man dared not move, afraid that any sudden gesture might trigger a reaction he wasn't prepared for. But the wolf didn't lunge. It didn't growl. It simply observed him, reading his intentions in the way only a wild animal could. Minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity, but Logan knew he had to do something. He couldn't stay frozen in fear forever. Slowly, he reached into his backpack, his fingers shaking as he pulled out the remains of a granola bar. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. He broke off a small piece and hesitated before tossing it gently onto the ground between them. The wolf flinched slightly, its ears twitching, but its gaze never left Logan's face. Then, cautiously, it sniffed the air, inching forward just enough to investigate the offering. Logan held his breath as the wolf lowered its head, sniffing the morsel before gingerly picking it up with its teeth. It chewed slowly, its gaze flickering between Logan and the surrounding trees, always alert, always ready to bolt if needed. Encouraged, Logan took another piece and extended his hand just slightly, resting it on his knee, palm up. He didn't expect the wolf to take it directly from him, but he wanted to show that he wasn't a threat. The wolf, however, remained cautious. It took another step closer, eyes locked on his every movement. Logan felt his heartbeat thunder in his chest. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was a test of trust. Would the wolf see him as a friend, or would instinct take over? Then, something remarkable happened. The wolf, still wary, lowered its head ever so slightly, a gesture that, in the wild, meant acknowledgement. It wasn't submission, nor was it complete trust, but it was something. A beginning. The pup-like curiosity in its golden eyes made Logan smile for the first time in hours. He was still stranded, still alone, but for the first time, he didn't feel completely hopeless. They were no longer just predator and prey. They were something else. Two souls, caught in the vast, untamed wild, searching for a way forward. Night settled over the forest, casting long shadows that danced between the trees. Logan pulled his jacket tighter around him, shivering from more than just the cold. The wolf remained nearby, pacing a few steps before settling down, its eyes still locked onto Logan's every move. The granola bar was gone, but the animal didn't leave. Logan realized that this wasn't just about food. Something deeper was unfolding between them. The wolf had every opportunity to disappear into the night, yet it stayed. There was something unspoken, a quiet understanding that neither fully grasped but both acknowledged. Logan's exhaustion was catching up with him. He hadn't moved from his stuck position in hours, and his body ached. Shifting slightly in his wheelchair, he let out a heavy sigh. The wolf's ears perked at the sound, its tail twitching slightly in response. Logan hesitated, then spoke softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're not leaving, are you?" The wolf blinked but didn't move. Logan took that as an answer. The tension between them had softened, enough that he felt brave enough to test the boundaries further. Reaching into his backpack, he retrieved a small metal flask filled with water. His throat was dry, and he took a slow sip before hesitating. He had no way of knowing if the wolf was thirsty, but if it was still here, maybe it needed something too. Carefully, he poured a small amount of water into the cap and placed it a short distance away from his chair. He leaned back, waiting. The wolf sniffed the air, but hesitated. Logan could see the indecision in its eyes, caution battling against need. Slowly, the animal inched forward, lowering its head to lap up the offering. Logan exhaled, feeling a strange sense of relief. It wasn't much, but it was something. The moment felt surreal, as if he had broken a barrier between them. The forest, once threatening, now felt quieter, almost like a sanctuary. As the hours passed, Logan's body begged for rest. The wolf, sensing his weariness, curled up a few feet away. Despite his predicament, Logan found an odd sense of comfort in the animal's presence. He whispered, almost to himself, "Guess we're in this together now." Sleep was restless, but it came. Through the night, Logan stirred occasionally, seeing the wolf still there, its ears twitching, always alert. It was keeping watch. For the first time since realizing he was stuck, Logan felt safer. A sharp rustling of leaves jolted Logan awake. His body ached from the awkward position he had slept in, his muscles stiff from the cold. The air was thick with tension. He turned his head to see the wolf, now standing, ears pricked, golden eyes locked onto the darkness beyond the trees. A prickle of unease crawled up Logan's spine. The forest was eerily silent, too silent. Then he heard it, a low, guttural growl from the unseen depths of the trees. It wasn't the wolf beside him. Something else was out there. Logan's pulse spiked. His breath hitched. A new fear settled into his bones. He was defenseless, unable to run, unable to fight. If something dangerous lurked nearby, there was nothing he could do but hope the wolf beside him was enough of a deterrent. The wolf let out a low, deep growl in response. A warning. Logan could feel the tension in its body, its fur standing on end. Whatever was watching them, it wasn't welcome. Minutes stretched on, the only sound the rhythmic beating of Logan's own heart. Then, as suddenly as it came, the presence in the woods retreated. The rustling faded, and silence returned. The wolf huffed and shook out its fur, but remained vigilant. Logan let out a slow breath. He wasn't sure whether to be relieved or more afraid. But he knew one thing. He wasn't alone. He glanced at the wolf and murmured, "Thanks." The wolf didn't react, but something in its posture softened. For the first time, Logan felt a strange kind of connection, one built on survival, trust, and an unspoken understanding between two very different beings. Hours later, dawn began to break, the first light of morning filtering through the trees. Logan knew the day ahead would be difficult. He was still stuck, still stranded, but he wasn't helpless, and he wasn't alone. For the first time in a long while, he believed that help would come. Until then, he had a guardian watching over him. And for now, that was enough. As the first golden rays of morning stretched over the treetops, Logan shifted in his wheelchair, his body aching from the long, cold night. The wolf still stood watch, its keen eyes scanning the forest, as if ensuring that whatever had lurked in the shadows the night before was truly gone. There was something unshakable about the animal's presence, a silent guardian in a world where Logan had often felt vulnerable. He took a slow breath, feeling both relief and exhaustion. The wolf turned its head slightly toward him, as if sensing his movement. They had spent the night together, neither of them speaking, one out of necessity, the other out of instinct. Now, as the light grew stronger, so did Logan's resolve. He had to find a way out. His fingers fumbled with the joystick of his wheelchair, testing the motor. The left wheel remained stuck, deeply entrenched in the mud that had dried slightly overnight. He let out a frustrated sigh. He wasn't going anywhere without help. The wolf stepped closer, sniffing at the ground where Logan's chair had sunk. Its nose nudged the wheel slightly, testing it. Logan watched in fascination. It almost seemed like the wolf understood. "I don't suppose you know how to push, do you?" Logan muttered. half laughing at his own hopelessness. The wolf huffed in response before circling behind the wheelchair. Logan wasn't sure what it was doing until he felt a sudden shift. The animal's paws pressed against the back of his chair, applying just enough force for the stuck wheel to move a few inches. Logan's eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you serious?" he breathed. He wiggled the joystick again, and this time the movement was smoother. Encouraged, Logan leaned forward, using all the strength he had left to assist in the motion. The wolf nudged again, and suddenly the chair lurched free. Logan gasped, overwhelmed by the unexpected partnership. He turned to the wolf, his heart hammering in his chest. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "But thank you." The wolf simply sat down, watching him as if waiting for what came next. Logan now had a choice. He could continue on his own, or he could trust this creature who had saved him twice now. But deep down, he already knew the answer. They had started this journey together, and he wasn't ready for it to end just yet. As Logan adjusted his chair and looked at the path ahead, the wolf stood up and trotted a few steps forward, then paused, glancing back. It was waiting for him. Logan smiled. "All right, buddy. Let's see where this takes us." And together they moved forward, deeper into the wilderness. Two lost souls, bound by fate and an unspoken understanding that neither of them had to be alone anymore. Logan and the wolf pressed forward, deeper into the wilderness. The early morning light filtered through the towering trees, casting long shadows over the frosted ground. Every push of Logan's wheelchair left a faint imprint in the damp earth, while the wolf moved with silent precision, always a few steps ahead, scanning their surroundings. Though the initial thrill of escaping his predicament lingered, reality was quick to set in. Logan was still lost. His supplies were dwindling, his body aching from the strain of maneuvering through uneven terrain. Yet, the presence of his newfound companion made the weight of the situation feel a little lighter. He wasn't alone, and that meant something. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig beneath the wheels of his chair. Logan's arms burned from exertion, and he knew he needed rest soon. The wolf, as if sensing his exhaustion, slowed its pace and turned back, waiting. "You always seem to know what I need," Logan muttered, a small smile forming on his lips. They came upon a small clearing near a shallow stream. The water glistened under the afternoon sun, its gentle rippling sound providing a sense of tranquility. Logan let out a relieved sigh and maneuvered himself to the edge, dipping his hands into the cool water before bringing it to his parched lips. The wolf stood nearby, watching. Logan scooped a handful of water and gently poured it onto the ground. The wolf hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward, lapping it up cautiously. A silent agreement had formed between them. They were in this together. As Logan rested, his mind drifted to thoughts of rescue. He had no idea how far he was from civilization, and with no working phone, he was at the mercy of chance. But he refused to let despair take hold. He had survived this far, and he wasn't about to give up now. As the sky darkened, a chill crept into the air. Logan reached into his bag for the last remnants of food, a protein bar, now slightly crushed. He broke it in half, tossing a piece toward the wolf, who sniffed it curiously before eating. It was a small offering, but one that spoke volumes. Just as Logan was about to settle in for another uneasy night, a distant sound caught his attention, a faint but distinct rumble. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be a road? A vehicle? He turned to the wolf, who had already perked up, ears twitching in alertness. Hope surged through Logan's veins. They had come this far. Maybe, just maybe, they were closer to safety than he had dared to believe. The distant rumble grew louder, vibrating through the earth beneath Logan's chair. He strained his ears, his breath hitching as he tried to determine the direction of the sound. The wolf stood motionless, ears perked, golden eyes flicking toward the distant noise. They both knew help might be close. Logan's heart pounded as he debated what to do. Should he try to move toward the sound, or stay put and hope someone would come looking? His arms ached, his body was exhausted, but he wasn't ready to give up now. He turned to the wolf, whose gaze remained locked on him, waiting. Taking a deep breath, Logan adjusted his wheelchair and pushed forward. The wheels struggled against the uneven ground, but he refused to stop. The wolf padded alongside him, a silent protector, never straying too far. The bond they had built over these few days had transcended mere survival. It was something more, something neither of them fully understood, but both accepted. As they continued, the sound of an approaching engine became undeniable. Logan's pulse quickened. A road had to be nearby. He pushed harder, his breath ragged. The wolf suddenly tensed, its fur bristling. Logan followed its gaze and spotted movement through the trees. An approaching truck kicking up dust along a dirt road. A surge of relief flooded him. He waved frantically, shouting with all the strength he had left. The truck slowed, then stopped. A man stepped out, eyes widening as he took in the sight of Logan and the wolf beside him. "Are you all right?" the man called, hurrying toward him. Logan let out a shaky breath, nodding. "I've been lost for days," he admitted. "I need help." The man reached for his radio, calling for assistance. Logan turned to the wolf, his chest tightening. This was it. The moment they had unknowingly been working toward. The wolf stared at him, as if sensing the change. Logan swallowed hard. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how, but you did." The wolf didn't move. It simply held his gaze for a long moment before turning toward the forest, its body shifting with the ease of a creature that belonged to the wild. Logan's throat tightened. "You're leaving, aren't you?" The wolf hesitated, then took a slow step backward. Logan clenched his jaw, blinking away the sting in his eyes. This was always how it had to be. The wolf had come into his life when he needed it most, but it didn't belong in the world Logan was returning to. "Go," he whispered. "Be free." The wolf let out a soft huff, then, without another glance, turned and disappeared into the trees. Logan watched until it was gone, his heart aching in a way he hadn't expected. As the rescue team arrived, loading him into the truck, Logan stared out at the vast wilderness. He had entered it lost and broken, but he was leaving with something more, something stronger. A story of survival, a story of trust, a story of an unbreakable bond between man and beast. And somewhere out there, a wild gray wolf still roamed, carrying the same story in its golden eyes. If this story moved you, remember, true strength comes not just from survival, but from the connections we forge along the way. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story with